It's installment 4.
Yep, you've done 3 and now the 4th.
And I've had some people in the Modern Quilt Studio Patterns and Fabrics page speculate whether we're going to start sewing units together yet, so they can start to see what things look like, and it's not yet. We're pulling out the suspense as long as we can.
The mystery is the fun.
Absolutely.
And it's also been great hearing from so many people who have been watching it unfold and saying, like, okay, I've been enjoying this. I just have to go. I know I'm coming in 4 weeks into it, but it's never too late to start.
You know what's also cool is we have people in Brazil and Sweden and Germany and Portugal and Australia and all over working on this quilt at the same time. So
you're part of a big community.
Yeah.
And once again, thank you for supporting each other and giving so much encouragement on the Facebook group.
And those curves.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Weeks and I were nervous about these curves because they were tighter curves than many of our quilts have required. And man, they look great, what you've posted. Now, I know that people don't generally post who wants to post the rejects? Maybe it took you a couple to get going, but you're doing fantastic work.
And now it's a new skill you have. And as one person said, I don't have to avoid patterns with curves in them anymore because now I feel like I can be confident with them. So,
especially because most curves you'll encounter are actually going to be a little more generous or larger than these, and you'll do them, you'll be like, piece of cake, I got this.
Exactly.
So this week we're introducing installment 4, and it starts out with what we've done before, going back to what you did before and finding...
let's look where we are.
Okay, so let's take a look. And what we're showing you here is a sample of what we did in installment 3.
Right. Not all of it, because some of that have been used already.
But you get the idea, once again, that there's a clear separation of group 1 and group 2. And of course, we've got to mention why.
Why?
So many people are like, why? First of all, I have to say, did you notice what it was called?
Yes.
Why? We knew that your reaction would be, why are we doing this? So we had to call it piece Y.
But you know, my favorite comment, people have said that is particularly mysterious. My favorite comment is, I hope that it's used to hold M&Ms. Which is a great use.
We keep talking about it being our pita bread, and I feel like I have to go get falafel and fill it up. But this is the Y piece.
It's not for M&Ms
or
for falafel, but it will continue to be Y until the last installment.
Yes.
So we're saving that, but we're very proud of it.
We're a little smug here, but also it's good to see it here. You can see how we took that semicircle from the 2 lightest. And, it's relative. It could have been, that's a split one. But these 2 were really the lightest of the semicircles, so it was a good call. And so that's what we've done up till now. And now we're going to whisk this away for a moment.
Well, we're going to be... Let's just tell them what we're going to be working on.
Great.
In installment 4. The first couple of steps are very straightforward, and we will not be demoing that because it should be very clear. You'll be revisiting some units from previous installments, and you'll also be making a couple of new ones.
Yeah. And speaking of revisiting ones from previous installments, we do want to walk you through the last few steps, introducing the idea of taking 2 blocks, cutting them apart, and splicing them together, because this is something you may not have done. And so I'm going to demonstrate the decision we made in terms of which blocks we used, and then Weeks will meet you over at the sewing machine to actually sew it.
Now, there are a lot of people, because I can anticipate where this is going. There are people who will wonder whether, what we mean by splicing and what we're what we're meaning is that we're going to take 2 units using a template, and we are going to combine them into 1 unit. You're going to be trimming off some of a block that you've already made. If you were one of those people who thought, why aren't they giving us finished measurements, in installment 1? This is where we were trying to allow for a little bit of error, perhaps on your part, and giving you a chance. We're calling these second chance blocks. So if you had a block, it was supposed to be 8.5 by 8.5 in the end when you were done with the finished units. However, maybe you were a little shy on those triangles or something. This would be a time that you can choose a block that might be a little bit bigger than it was supposed to be, or a little bit smaller than it was supposed to be, and you can still use it, because as long as it's 8.5 tall, it doesn't matter because you're cutting off some of it.
These are the blocks that we have to choose from. We've made 3 of the J2 and 2 of the G1 that were made previously. The goal here is to pick 1 of each that when we put them together, they're going to be clearly different. So let's take a look. If I try to splice part of this onto this lavender is lighter than this violet, but not a ton. It's not super crisp. And so I don't think this is an ideal combination, but I could look at this block and look how much crisper that difference is. If we sew this into that, you'll see a much stronger contrast. So this is a little unusual. You're not trying to make a pretty block or match colors. You're trying to pick 1 of each that if you put them together, they're going to be distinctly different. Really a different way of thinking.
It is, for sure.
So I'm going to set these aside. And the thing is, you'll find that most blocks would work pretty well. Now, I've prepared my 2 templates ahead of time. I have a 7B and I have a 7A. And this is definitely, again, slightly unusual. Do you mind handing me the rotary cutter? Thank you.
And our very fancy chalk.
Yeah, we love ordinary school board chalk. We also use our Clover fine point marker because that's beautiful. We go back and forth between the 2. So right now, this is the block and I have a gentle curve. Notice there's a note on the templates that it's a very gentle curve, so don't accidentally cut it with a ruler.
And let's also just reinforce that on the template sheet in installment 4, there are measurements that you want to confirm are correct before you cut. You can go through the Patterns and Fabrics Facebook group to look. You can search for printer issues. People have settings they didn't understand, or they weren't setting it to actual size or 100% or whatever. You can change devices. You can go to some place like a FedEx store
or public library.
You can ask a friend to print it out, but you do not want to cut anything until you have confirmed that the measurements on the template sheet are accurate.
And 98% of people or more, it's not an issue at all, but sometimes people have a printer where there's a buried setting that somehow shrinks or enlarges the page. So as long as that's the right size, it'll be good. And you'll also know because these templates are 8.5 inches high, so it should fit perfectly on top of your block.
And the registration points.
And I've transferred the registration marks. And I'm just going to cut, nothing like the pressure of cutting on camera, right? And I'm just freehand cutting. I'm going to set this aside. This 7A piece is what I'm going to need. I'm going to just go here and put my registration marks. Hey, I don't have to transfer it in the middle. I just happen to have a seam there, so it works perfectly for this block. So I've got my registration marks. I'm going to set that aside. And now with 7B, which is a smaller template, I'm going to set this right on top of my block. And I'm going to cut this and trim it away. And I'm just rotating so I can cut. Usually I'd be cutting standing up, but I'm sitting down, so.
And this is a good time to remind you to please close your rotary cutter before it leaves your hand.
I close and open between every single cut because I don't want to cut myself.
We've seen people in classes get very injured.
Now, this time I'm transferring the registration marks opposite the template because this little guy I'm setting aside. What you're doing in this installment is splicing this piece to this piece. This is a curve. It's not extreme like the semicircles you had before, but it's still a curve. So Weeks is going to take over and show you how she would pin this and sew it over at the sewing table.
And also, before we go over there, the pieces that you cut, please set these aside because this is a bonus possibility for you that we'll explain in installment number 6. Okay, so let's get started on splicing these blocks. First, I'm going to show you how to pin them, and then I'll show you that seam. It's a little awkward looking, but it's really important for the final design. I'm going to start, as always, with pinning the center. Curves are always easiest if you start in the center. And then it's not as critical since it's a gentle curve, but then I'll pin the registration points and then the ends. So I'm going to align that seam. And again, if you're pressing to the side, you're going to use the seam. We press open, so it's really easy to see where that is. And I'm going to align that chalk mark with that seam at the 1/4 inch point. Okay, now we're going to go and look for the registration point from the smaller unit to the larger unit and align those. It's going to be a little bit odd feeling because the corners are going to have a little bit of an overlap because there's a curve, but don't worry, we'll get there. Now we're going to do that other registration point, aligning the small piece and the large piece. And now the ends. And I'm going to turn this so it's a little easier for you to see. You're going to have a little bit of overlap where those curves meet, but don't worry about that. And again, about a 1/4 inch in. And you should expect on the back to see a small little edge hang over where that curve is meeting. Okay, so let's get sewing. You're going to want to sew with the larger piece flat as you did with the semicircles in the previous installment. I don't pull out the pins until absolutely necessary. We've got our little starter unit there. So we're going to go straight in. And then I'm going to move the first pin, gently sew that curve. And again, you're going to be, if you need to make any adjustments halfway along the curve, you can put your needle down and do that. Use your fingernails to just get those edges together if they start to pull a little bit. should be a pretty easy stitching. You're going to hit a seam on the larger block, but just keep sewing straight over it. If you press the side, it'll be a little bit lumpy, but you just keep going, you'll be fine. Okay. So now you're going to press this open, and I will go over to the iron to take care of that. So this is what your block is going to look like right now. You're going to flip it over. And again, any way you want to press is fine with us. We press open. You can use your preferred method and just use that. I like a little steam. Bill uses less steam than I do, but I find it easier just to tack everything down very quickly and then flip it over. And you'll see that there's a gentle curve that splice those two blocks together. So here's the final block. It looks odd right now, but it's part of the mystery.
And it will measure 8.5 by 8.5 at this point. So you've taken 2 and made 1. Enjoy. We'll see you next week.